Hey guys, so what I'm going to be doing here today is something a little different while we're waiting to get some tech videos going. Although I'm going to wait at some point to get my video editing software. So while we're waiting on that, I'm going to eventually do a interesting album review that it's an album that not many people heard of, and it's from a band that you might heard of and you might not heard of. They go by the name of Apocalyptica, which was formed in the 90s by a bunch of some students that were in the Sibelius Academy at the time, notable for doing their Metallica covers on four cellos. Although at some point in the late 90s they released an album called Inquisition Symphony that had three original songwriting and composition, although the vast majority of that album still had song covers, which that album has a pivotal point in the evolution of Apocalyptica when they were slowly shifting into their original songwriting, although that album was basically slept on. So but that was an album that was mostly focused more onto their original composition and songwriting. And this was a new album. The album that we're going to be talking about was a new album at the time that Apocalyptica brought into the new millennium. Although when they released this album, this was a whole new. It was a whole new level. It was basically a game changer for the band. And Apocalyptica, they're basically, like I mentioned, they're not just your typical metal group. They're more, I would say, symphonic metal and progressive metal based on their elements. So with that being said, with Cult being one of their game changers, being focused on their original composition, but prior to while they were in the process of working on Cult, or at some point in 2000, one record label asked them if they wanted to do some Motorhead, AC/DC, and Slayer covers, which they declined to do those covers to focus more into their original songwriting, which I wouldn't blame them, even though they became a bit more successful especially when they caught the attention of Metallica in the 90s. So with Cult being released in October of 2000, but there was a special version of Cult that was released in April of 2001, which we're definitely going to be looking at. Although this one was an album that featured the very first vocal tracks, which were basically by two different German singers. No matter if you got the special edition or the regular version, what will get your attention is basically when you see that big skull on the cover. You definitely know it's going to be a one cool metal album. But it's not just one cool metal album, it's one that's going to take you down this tumultuous journey to a different, basically it's a whole new level, like I mentioned. So the album we're going to be looking at is this. This is the Cult Special Edition that was released through Mercury and Island Records through Universal Music Group. So with that being said, this album includes two separate discs, with the second disc including the vocal tracks. So let's start off with the opening track of the album from disc 1, Path, which got this very vibrant classical sounding approach that just quickly builds up enough to where it inevitably changed those expectations to a more hard rock sounding approach, utilizing the distortion of those electric cellos to where it's basically like you're going down a different road to find the path, of course. So then you go into Struggle, where you got this epic gut punching opening that sounds like a classic horror movie, where you got like this, giving you this feel of a confrontation, or having a perspective of taking on a confrontation or some type of kill while you're on some type, or to take on some type of chase. This one is where it gets a bit aggressive on the album, showing you what this album, what Apocalyptica is basically capable of. Well, hammering away on those percussions. Then we shift into romance, to where this one's where you get the brooding side of the instrument, where this one is a bit calm and got this beautiful dance while you're going through these rougher waters, giving you that piratey feel, like you're watching some piratey, like some kind of interesting movie, that while you're sailing through those rougher waters. Being this one was also dedicated to a band, one of the friends of the band members, Chrissy and Elias, if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Even though I'm just basically looking at my notes, referring to some of my notes while we're doing this album review. So then we flow out of romance into Prey, where this one's a bit aggressive, which, with the aggressive approach, just adding enough depth to make the song a bit intense. Then it gets followed up with the next track, In Memoriam, where this one was one of the two tracks on the album dedicated to the band's late sound engineer, who unfortunately passed away in 1999, who goes by the name of Tapsa. Where this one starts off very light, bright, and a bit more morose for a little while, to where it just subvert those expectations, to where when the cellos start blasting back onto the scene, you got this thrash metal intensity adding the epicness into the song, to where all of a sudden it just shifts back into that calm approach after you get past that metal intensity. Then we go into, then you got hyperventilation, to where this one, it starts kind of a bit dark, to where things goes back to being a bit more aggressive, where this one you get to hear those epic riffs from those electric cellos, with them utilizing that distortions from those electric cellos, just pounding, while you hear the percussions on this one just pounding away. Then you got Beyond Time, where this one's another track dedicated to Tapsa. This is the one that's where it's very similar to Romance to some degree, but although giving my own interpretation, my own perspective, which this one, it's like the band's basically being able to find a path beyond their loss, and being able to move on from that loss, while still maintaining that classical approach, and that making it this one's a bit more focused, while this one's being, like I've said, being a bit more focused. Sorry for I had a little brain fart there. Then Hope continues that mission even further, where it starts off a bit light, but at the same time you still got this melody where it's beautiful and haunting at the same time, while it sets course to cut through any doubts, while setting a path to confront whatever's in the way. But then we go into the next track, which was the finished word for Polar Night. This one's called Camos, which you got these muted, plucky cello strings that start you off, to where this one you get this aggressive approach, where this one gets a bit more aggressive, to where it does that, got this ending that just, where the song, it just continues to build, where when it gets louder and louder and louder, where it does have an uncertain ending, where this one, I'd find this one could have been a bit more longer, because this one was just so epic. It just basically just wants to, when it gets louder and louder with that uncertain ending, although it just makes you want to just, where it just wants, where you basically, where you want to let the or this one, you want to allow the music to take you and pull you away to a whole different world. Then you got the actual closure of the, on the album, which is Coma, before the added cover songs. Oh, this one is where a bit acoustic and very slow, and even though this one's a bit more on the ambient side, where this one got this spirally feel, where it's slow and subdued and almost 7 minutes long. And the fun fact is they actually performed this live at the Halola Church, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'm not from Finland, so somebody might point that out in the comments. And you do have some added cover songs on the original release, which you have. In the Hall, the Mountain King in the heavy metal form, done by Apocalyptica, which is a very good cover, and it's a must-have if you. Then you got the two Metallica covers, which would be the Until It Sleeps Again and Fight Fire with Fire, which are very good covers. But that Until It Sleeps Again cover is pretty nice. Then we go into the second disc, which the second disc has the two reworked tracks from Cult, which is Path Volume 2, which still starts you off with that very light, bright, classical sounding approach, which this one features Sandra Nasik from Guano Apes, allowing her vocals to blend in to make the song a bit more epic, with the song's perspective being about finding that you found the path. And although some portions of the lyrics kind of don't make sense, but it's still a good song. Because some people might find the song kind of rushed, but although you're basically being able to find, it's basically about being able to find the path. Then you got the next vocal track, which was featured in the 2001 French movie Vidocq, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this one features Matthias Sayer from Farmer Boys. And what's so unique about Hope Volume 2, this one has, the intro is a little bit longer, but it does, what makes it, with it being a little bit longer, is just, you get this epic build up to where it's still a bit light. And the lyrics on this one is just incredible. Although I'm assuming they let Matthias Sayer have that creative freedom to work with the song and adding his lyrics and utilizing that creative freedom to work with that song to it's just, at the same time, it's still beautiful and haunting at the same time, while still being able to cut through any doubts with the chords that's still set in place, with still being able to confront whatever's in the way when you listen to the lyrics, especially when you get into that second verse. So yeah, this is my even though this is like my first album review on my YouTube channel. Although there's somebody else that did a review of the irregular release of Cult. But what's so unique about Cult is you got that percussion, that double bass, blending in those unique elements. Although Apocalyptica, they started focusing more and started getting the motivation of doing more original songwriting and composition and more vocal tracks when they start with their with the next release, which was Reflections at the time, being another which was a self-produced album, and still not doing many song covers until recently with their new album that's going to be coming out, Plays Metallica Volume 2. And what's so incredible is that Apocalyptica their music is just so awesome to listen to. But if I do another album review, I might do might go into a Tool album that I have, because I got a bunch of Tool albums out of my out of all the set of albums I have. So if this one gets enough views, then we're definitely going to be doing one of my favorite Tool albums, which would be Lateralis. So hope you guys enjoyed this album review, and with that being said, thanks for watching.